Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to cut through the noise, grab the most potent scholarly material out there, and we'll just synthesize it into pure, focused knowledge for you.
That's the goal.
And you came to us wanting to go deeper on the Nile Valley, right? Looking beyond just the standard story of ancient Egypt, seeking the African roots of Kemet.
And we've definitely got the sources for that today. We're immersing ourselves in the work of some really formidable African scholars, people like Dr. Ben, Dr. Kimani Nhusi, Tinubu Manjarais, and Dr. Malefi Keita Asante.
Okay.
Their collective work, it aims to establish really unequivocally the African identity and origins of Kemet, showing its deep, inseparable connection to Nubia.
So our mission today, it's ambitious, sure, but it's clear. We're moving past the tourist version of history. We want to uncover those foundational links between the earliest Nile Valley civilizations and challenge, decades, maybe even centuries of historical distortion.
Yeah.
We want to reveal that enduring cultural, philosophical blueprint they laid down.
A blueprint that, still shapes the African world and arguably global culture today. It's foundational.
Absolutely.
But it's really crucial to grasp the context here. Dr. Asante makes this sharp point. If we talk about ancient Greeks, nobody demands proof they were white.
Right. It's just assumed.
Exactly. But bring up ancient Egypt, Kemet, and suddenly the demand for proof of its African identity is immediate, often, frankly, hostile. This information is often actively suppressed, pushed aside.
So getting an accurate understanding, it requires this kind of deep dive.
It's essential.
Yeah.
Especially if we want the true trajectory of human civilization. And that means we have to start by, resetting the timeline itself.
Okay, let's dive right into that. That monumental claim. Standard textbooks, they teach Egypt. Kemet was the start, the pinnacle.
Right, the beginning and the end almost.
So these scholars, they argue forcefully against that. They're suggesting focusing only on Egypt is, historically misplaced. Dr. Ben had that blunt analogy. What was it?
Oh, yeah. He said that suggesting Egypt was the first civilization in Africa is like claiming a rabbit is a pigeon. Just fundamentally miscategorized.
Okay, that definitely gets the point across.
It really does. It drives straight to that core idea. Kemet was magnificent, no question, but it wasn't the genesis. In the view of these scholars, Kemet was arguably one of the last of the ancient cultures along the Nile to really unify into a state.
One of the last.
Relatively speaking, yes. The real headwaters, the oldest points of continuous culture, you have to look further south. Upriver.
Upriver. And this isn't just about digging things up, right? It's about the laws of nature, how people actually moved back then.
Absolutely. Think about it logically. River travel, thousands of years ago. Before sails were common, how did people navigate?
Logs, maybe simple boats.
Exactly. Logs, maybe hollowed out canoes later. Now, imagine trying to build a massive society and push that culture, that population up the Nile, fighting against that powerful northward current. It's almost impossible as a primary migration pattern.
So movement influence, it would naturally flow down the river from south to north.
By necessity, yes. Civilization, the ideas, the people, they flow downriver, which means the origins, the source, has to be upriver.
Which puts us geographically where?
Far south, in the region encompassing modern-day Ethiopia, Uganda, Somalia, Kenya, and critically for our discussion, Nubia.
So it's a south to north flow we should be picturing, not Egypt just popping up in isolation.
Precisely. And this isn't just us saying this now. Our sources point to very early internal Kemetic tradition.
Yeah.
There's an Egyptian historian cited writing way back in the 2nd or 3rd dynasty, incredibly early days.
Okay, what did they say?
He explicitly wrote, "We came from the beginning of the Nile, where God happy dwells at the foothills of the mountain of the moon."
Wow. So Kemet's own memory pointed south.
Directly south. Essentially admitting their cultural origins lay upriver, towards the source of the Nile.
Okay, so if the civilization starts upriver, what was that whole area, including what we now call Egypt, known as before Kemet unified?
Well, before Egypt, which is a later Greek name, and even before the African name Kemet really solidified for the unified state, the broader region was known as the land of Nubia, or sometimes Tanahi.
Tani.
Yes, Tanahi is identified by these scholars as the key pre-dynastic state, or states, really. Dr. Ben puts it so powerfully. Nubia was Egypt before Egypt became Nubia.
Okay, Nubia was Egypt before Egypt became Nubia. That completely reframes it.
It does. It means the cultural, political, spiritual groundwork for what became Kemet was laid down, inherited directly from those earlier Nubian entities. Nubia wasn't just a neighbor. It was the mother culture.
And this lineage, this connection, you see it cemented with the very first figure who unified the whole land.
Absolutely. We're talking about Menes. You sometimes hear the Greek version, Narmer, He's that crucial figure credited with unifying Kemet, bringing Upper Egypt the south and Lower Egypt the north together.
Creating the world's first unified nation-state.
The very first. And our sources are crystal clear. Menes was definitively African, originating from the Upper Nile, reflecting that southern dominance in the unification.
So an African leader from the south creates this unified state. How quickly did that Nubian cultural and spiritual influence make itself felt in the first dynasty?
Oh, immediately. And intentionally. Look at Menes' immediate successor, King Aha, the founder of the first dynasty proper.
Okay.
Aha isn't just recorded as a ruler, but as the first priest of ancient Egypt, in one of his first major acts. He introduces a specifically Nubian god into the official Kemetic pantheon, Menli.
Menli. That's a name you don't often hear in the standard accounts. What's the significance of bringing him in?
It's huge. It reveals both a power dynamic and a deep spiritual continuity. In the Nubian tradition, Menli is seen as the equal, maybe even the senior brother of Osiris.
Osiris, who becomes so central later on.
Exactly. So by integrating Menli and placing him arguably in a position of seniority right at the beginning, King Aha was basically stamping the spiritual legitimacy of the new state with its southern Nubian origins.
And the fact Menli gets downplayed later.
That suggests an active effort down the line to perhaps adjust the narrative, to maybe minimize that foundational southern Nubian theological base. It highlights that history is often written and rewritten by those in power.
And this deep connection, this relationship between Nubia and Kemet, it wasn't just ancient history, right? It continued for millennia.
Absolutely. It wasn't a one-off thing at the beginning. We see Nubian influence playing a vital role much later, especially during the 24th and 25th dynasties.
What was happening then?
Well, Kemet was often fragmented, sometimes under Libyan rule, generally in a state of decline, Dr. Ben calls it, her dying days.
Okay.
And who steps in? It's the Nubian pharaohs, the Kushites from the south. They come north, reunify Egypt, and consciously restore the classic traditions of Kemet.
So they weren't invaders imposing something new?
Not at all. They saw themselves as restoring the original Orthodox culture and religion of the entire Nile Valley. It shows that Nubia remained this primary, often restoring force in the region for thousands of years.
Okay, let's shift from the geography and the timeline to the people themselves. The evidence for the African identity of the ancient Egyptians, the Kemetians. And we can start with the name they chose for their own land, Kemet.
Yes, this is fundamental. It's linguistic proof right from the source. Kemet means the land of the black people, full stop.
Not just the black land, referring to the soil.
While the rich black earth, Kemet, was incredibly important, the scholars we're looking at, like Dr. Asante, emphasized that Kemet specifically denoted the people. By calling their nation the land of the blacks, they were explicitly defining themselves in ethnic racial terms. There's really no ambiguity there from their own perspective.
And this self-definition, it wasn't just internal. What about outside observers, people who actually saw them, like the ancient Greeks?
Right, and this is where the historical record gets, let's say, inconvenient for later attempts to whitewash Kemet. The Greek observers, writing before centuries of racial bias really took hold, consistently confirmed the blackness of the Kemetians.
You have Herodotus, right, the father of history.
Exactly. Herodotus, traveling and writing in the 5th century BC, he spent time in Egypt. He made a very specific comparison when discussing the people of Colchis on the Black Sea.
What did he say about them?
He concluded they must be related to the Egyptians, or an Egyptian colony, because, like the Egyptians, they had black skin and woolly hair.
Black skin and woolly hair, that's pretty direct.
It's incredibly direct. It's based on visual observation, using two very clear physical markers, skin color and hair texture, that place the Egyptians firmly within the African spectrum of the time. And he wasn't alone.
Who else?
Aristotle.
With what?
Writing centuries later, but certainly having access to Egyptians and information about them.
What did Aristotle record?
In his work, Physiognomica, Aristotle just states it plainly. He says the Egyptians he observed were very black, and he even draws a comparison, saying they were similar in appearance to the Ethiopians.
And Ethiopians were universally understood as black Africans.
Universally. So you have these consistent accounts from respected classical observers, travelers, historians, philosophers presenting this unified picture. It completely contradicts the later Aryan model of history that tried so hard to detach Kemet from Africa.
Okay, beyond physical descriptions, let's talk language again. As a kind of cultural time capsule, Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop, the famous Senegalese scholar, He strongly urged studying Nubian languages. Why?
Diop recognized, and our sources echo this, that languages like Nobian, which is still widely spoken in the Nubian region today, from Aswan down into Sudan,
Yes.
that Nobian is a direct living link to the ancient past, preserves words, concepts, ways of thinking that have maybe faded elsewhere. It's like unlocking a linguistic treasure chest.
Can you give an example? Something fundamental.
Absolutely. Take the name of the river itself, the Nile. We use that name all the
That's
time.
great.
But Nile is actually a Greek corruption. The original word still present in Nobian is Nile.
Nile. And what does Nile mean?
It simply means the drink, as in that which I drink.
Wow, just the drink.
Yeah. It's pragmatic, deeply local. It signifies ownership, connection. This is our drink, the source of our life, not some abstract foreign name.
That localization makes sense. And does this apply to really core concepts too, like kingship? We all use the word pharaoh.
Right, but pharaoh isn't the original term. It's not what the Africans called their leader. Again, it comes filtered through Greek and Hebrew.
So what was the African name?
The African name, rooted in Nubian culture, was Pa, P-A-A.
Pa.
And Pa symbolized the big king, often implicitly the big king who lives in the big house, the palace. Is the authentic organic term, linking the ruler directly to the land and the community structure.
So using pharaoh kind of pushes aside that original cultural meaning.
It does. It's a subtle form of linguistic replacement, obscuring the original identity and context of the leadership.
This is incredible. And you're saying even the foundational gods of Kemet, the divine trinity, they're still recognizable in everyday Nobian language today.
That's perhaps the most stunning evidence of continuity. It's not just history, it's alive. Take god Horus, sometimes rendered hero.
Okay, Horus, the falcon god.
Yes. Well, the word for lightning in Nobian today is hero, or sometimes hiru-ark.
Lightning, hero.
Yes. Think about it. The powerful, bright, sky-dwelling deity associated with kingship and power. Preserved in the modern word for that sudden flash of light and power from the sky. It's not a coincidence.
That's amazing. And what about Shu, the god of air?
Shu is even more integrated into daily life. Shu represented the atmosphere, wind, breath, the space between earth and sky.
Right.
Well, today, if a Nobian speaker wants someone to say close a door or a window against the wind, what do they say? They use the command a show.
A show?
Exactly, meaning close it, please. They are literally invoking the concept, maybe unconsciously the god Shu, the controller of air, to manage the airflow in their home.
Thousands of years later.
Thousands of years later, the theology is embedded in simple, everyday commands. It shows an unbroken cultural and linguistic thread.
Moving beyond language for a moment, the sources also talk about how this cultural blueprint was physically carried, literally on the body, the practice of facial scarification.
Yes, this is a really profound point about visible spiritual continuity. Scarification is widespread across Africa, west to east, in various forms.
And often dismissed today as just tribal markings or aesthetics.
Right. But in the Nile Valley context, these marks, whether vertical lines, horizontal, T-shapes, they often served a deep religious purpose. They frequently represented the divine trinity Osiris, Isis, Horus, or sometimes the central creator figure, Amun-Ra.
So people were carrying their theology on their faces.
Literally. Carrying their history, their connection to the divine, their dedication to the core spiritual philosophy, right there for everyone to see. It was a living, breathing expression of their deepest beliefs, not just decoration.
And we see this continuity in names, too, like from ancient royalty down to today.
Absolutely. Look at Queen Nefertari, one of the most famous queens of Kemet. Her name breaks down beautifully. Nefer means beautiful. And Tari means beloved one, beautiful beloved one. Well, that tradition echoes directly in Nobian culture today.
How so?
A common name given to a baby girl is Nefaranan,
Nefaran.
which means beautiful mother. But it's more than just a pretty name. Giving that name carries a societal expectation
Expectation.
that this child will grow up to be like a queen, a great lady,
Wow.
someone who serves and is beloved by the entire community, not just her own family. It sets a standard of contribution of regal responsibility to the whole society right from birth.
Wow, that's powerful. And lastly, even clothing styles connect back.
Yes, the traditional Nubian cultural dress. The preference, especially for elders or formal occasions, for pure white clothing and often a white headdress.
Okay.
That's not just random fashion. It directly mirrors the earliest, most consistent depictions we have of the key god, Osiris or Usar in the older pronunciation. He's almost always shown wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt and white ceremonial clothes.
So the modern dress echoes the ancient divine image.
It's a visual echo across millennia. All these threads, language, names, markings, dress they weave together to show this isn't about separate civilizations. It's one long, continuous Nile Valley cultural tapestry, deeply African.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly and talk about the core thinking behind Cometian civilization, the intellectual and spiritual engine, if you will, which brings us to Mot.
Ma'at. Yes, this is arguably the single most important philosophical concept to come out of the Nile Valley.
Yeah.
And it's so much bigger than any single English word we have, like truth or justice.
So what is Mot then?
It's the central organizing principle, the bedrock of the Kemetic worldview. It's best defined, as Dr. Nahuzi lays out, by a specific cluster of interconnected parameters: truth, justice, righteousness, order, balance, harmony, and reciprocity. All 7 together.
All 7 at once, not just picking one.
Exactly. You couldn't separate them. And its application was completely holistic.
What do you mean by holistic?
It means Ma'at governed everything simultaneously. Your personal conduct, your family life, the community, the social environment, politics, nature, the entire cosmos. It all had to be in alignment with Ma'at.
Can you give an example of how that worked practically?
Sure. Think about governance. Reciprocity, one of the pillars of Ma'at, demanded that if the Nile flooded bountifully and produced a great harvest,
Yes.
the rulers, the officials, had a duty, grounded in Ma'at, to ensure that surplus was stored and redistributed fairly, especially in leaner times. That wasn't just charity, it was social justice, maintaining balance and harmony. If a ruler hoarded wealth or acted unjustly,
They weren't just being greedy.
they were fundamentally disrupting Ma'at. They were disrupting the cosmic order itself through their actions. The personal, social, and cosmic were inseparable.
And this deep sense of holistic responsibility, it carried right through to the afterlife, to the moment of judgment.
Absolutely. This leads us to the famous judgment scene in the Hall of Ma'at. When a person transitioned, their spirit didn't just, hope for the best. They faced a formal assessment.
And it wasn't about confessing sins, was it?
No, interestingly, it was the opposite. The spirit had to make positive declarations of innocence. There were 42 specific declarations of innocence they had to recite, affirming the ways they had lived in accordance with Ma'at.
42? Like what?
Things like, I have not stolen, I have not committed murder, I have not lied, but also incredibly nuanced things like, I have not made anyone weep, I have not been eavesdropper, I have not polluted the water.
Wow. That's a comprehensive ethical guide for life.
It truly is. It's an incredibly sophisticated moral code designed to guide conduct throughout life, and it predates things like the 10 Commandments by thousands of years.
And the central image of that judgment, the weighing of the heart, there's a connection there to how we still talk today, isn't there?
A direct, amazing connection. The ancient Africans saw the heart, ib, not just as a pump, but as the seat of intelligence, emotion, conscience, memory, the center of conscious morality. In the judgment, the deceased heart was placed on a scale, weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the symbol of truth, lightness, righteousness.
And if the heart was heavy?
If the person had lived a life contrary to Ma'at, filled with wrongdoing, lies, injustice, their heart would literally be heavy, outweighing the feather. The consequence was terrifying. Annihilation, being devoured by the beast Kemet.
So when we say today, oh, that would weigh heavy on my heart, or he has a heavy heart,
we are unconsciously echoing this profound ancient African concept of moral accountability, where your actions literally impact the substance, the weight of your moral center. It's embedded in our language.
Incredible. Now, this whole vast system of knowledge, science, philosophy, spirituality, it was taught and transmitted through what the Greeks later called the mystery system.
Right. And our sources are quick to point out it was only a mystery to outsiders like the Greeks because they weren't initiated into it.
So for the Africans, it wasn't mysterious.
No, it was the established, rigorous process of education. It was their university system, essentially. It required years of study, discipline, and initiation into various fields: mathematics, astronomy, medicine, architecture, philosophy, theology. It aimed to produce a whole, balanced person aligned with Ma'at.
And what's really radical, especially compared to later Western thought, is how deeply science and theology were intertwined.
Fundamentally intertwined. This is key. The ancient Africans didn't see a conflict between science and spirit. They used science, advanced mathematics, geometry, algebraic calculation as the foundation for their theology.
So spirituality wasn't just based on faith or myth.
It was based on observable, calculable reality. They sought to understand the divine through cosmic principles, through proof, through mathematics. Their priests were often also scientists and mathematicians.
Dr. Ben talks about this idea of spiritual geometry. Can you unpack that a bit? How did they use math to understand the universe?
He describes this core concept. The universe originates from a single central point, undifferentiated energy. This point projects outward, creating a circle representing totality.
Okay, circle from a point.
This circle is then divided, often by perpendicular lines, creating 4 quadrants representing the cardinal directions, the elements, the divisions of the cosmos. Critically, there's the central axis, the point of origin.
Right.
Through precise geometric calculation and projection from this center point, the form of the pyramid emerges. The pyramid wasn't just a tomb. It was a physical mathematical expression of their cosmology, a model of the universe calculated from first principles.
A calculated universe.
Exactly. With God, often symbolized by Rosso Ra, signifying the radiating, seeing, commanding center as that unmoving, absolute central point from which all reality is mathematically projected and sustained.
And the scientific mathematical worldview, it even underpinned their ideas about justice, the law of opposites.
Precisely. The law of opposites flows directly from that need for geometric and cosmic equilibrium. If everything originates from a center and expands, then any action inevitably creates an opposite reaction to maintain balance.
Like physics.
Almost like cosmic physics. If you perform an act of injustice, disrupting that today, you scientifically guarantee a balancing corrective consequence tomorrow or down the line. That imbalance must be rectified to restore harmony to the system.
So it wasn't just divine punishment, but a kind of natural law.
It was understood as an inherent law of the cosmos.
Yeah.
This is the deep, calculated root of their justice system. It's far more profound than just an eye for an eye. It's about maintaining the fundamental balance of reality. This idea was later simplified, maybe distorted, into concepts like sins being visited upon future generations.
Yeah.
But the original Kemetic concept was about the immutable scientific necessity for continuous cosmic balance, where moral law had the same weight as physical law.
Okay, so we have this incredibly deep, sophisticated, continuous history, philosophy, culture, stretching back millennia, which inevitably raises the question, why isn't this common knowledge? Why is so much of it actively obscured or denied today?
Yeah, this is where we have to shift from pure history into understanding the politics of historical narrative.
It's unavoidable.
And the sources talk about deliberate efforts, right?
Yes.
Especially regarding Nubia and language.
Yes. Tenuta Mongerais, in particular, highlights the conscious political efforts, especially in more modern times, to essentially erase the name Nubia and impose a different, often Arabicized identity on the region and its people.
Like the name Sudan.
Exactly. Linguistically, the Arabic word Sudan simply means land of the blacks, objectively descriptive. But politically, within the context of centuries of the Arab slave trade targeting Africans,
It took on a different meaning.
it became weaponized. Politically, it came to mean land of slaves, or at least carried that heavy connotation, effectively stripping the people of their ancient, powerful Nubian identity and replacing it with a term linked to subjugation. So changing the name changes the historical narrative, the sense of self.
Profoundly. And this attack wasn't just on names of places, but on the languages themselves, the mother tongues that carry the culture.
How so?
Under the Arab Republic of Egypt, for instance, under Nasser, there were explicit policies prohibiting the teaching and study of Nubian languages like Nobian in schools. They were labeled sublanguages, dialects unfit for formal education.
Why suppress the language?
Because, as the scholars emphasize, these African languages carry the seeds and the elements of the African Nile Valley history. If you kill the language or degrade it, you sever the people's direct connection to their own historical memory, the philosophy, their identity. You force them into the language and thus the worldview of the colonizer or dominant power.
And this political distortion, it even extends to basic geography, like placing Egypt in the Middle East.
Oh, absolutely. The Middle East is a prime example of political geography overriding actual geography. Egypt is in Africa, period. You can walk there from other African countries.
It's physically connected.
Indisputably. The term Middle East isn't ancient. It's a relatively modern political construct, really solidifying after World War II, maybe late 1940s, 1950s. And its application to Egypt serves to pull it out of its African context.
Why? What was the motive for geographically relocating it conceptually?
The motive, as Dr. Asante and others diagnose it, stems from what they call the legacy of disbelief.
The legacy of disbelief.
Yes. Think back to when Napoleon's expedition landed in Egypt around 1799. His scholars accompany the army, and what did they find?
Pyramids, temples, inscriptions.
They found a civilization that was, in their own words, more majestic and more monumental than Greece and Rome combined. This discovery created a massive intellectual crisis for Europe.
Why a crisis?
Because the entire framework of European intellectual history at the time, the dominant narrative, was built on the idea that high civilization began with Greece and Rome. That was the pinnacle, the source.
And crucially, Greece and Rome were seen as European, as white.
Precisely. And here they were, confronted with undeniable evidence of an older, arguably grander civilization built by black African people. At the very same time, Europe was deeply invested in justifying the enslavement and colonization of African people based on theories of racial inferiority.
It completely contradicted their worldview and their political projects.
Utterly. They couldn't reconcile it. How could these people, deemed inferior, have built this? This cognitive dissonance, this disbelief, led directly to the construction of the Aryan model of history.
What's the Aryan model?
It was an attempt to explain away Kemet's African origins. It argued that civilization must have been brought to Egypt by outsiders, maybe mysterious Aryans, maybe people from Asia, maybe even Proto-Greeks, anyone but the native Africans. It was a deliberate intellectual maneuver to excise Kemet from Africa and graft it onto a European or Near Eastern lineage, preserving the idea of European civilizational supremacy.
Purely ideological.
Driven by ideology and the need to maintain a racial hierarchy. Denying Africa its foundational role in world history became central to that project.
And the impact of this historical distortion, this erasure, we still feel it today, don't we? Especially in education.
Absolutely. It's baked into many Western education systems. Think about how history is often taught. Where does the story usually begin?
Greece and Rome. Maybe Mesopotamia, briefly.
Right. It starts with these relatively young civilizations, often implicitly presented as the beginning of philosophy, democracy, science. The thousands of years of African civilization that came before, particularly in the Nile Valley, are minimized, ignored, or, as we discussed, racially reclassified.
And Dr. Asante mentioned the cost of this for students of African descent.
Yes, he points out the profound psychological and intellectual cost. African-American students, for example, often feel alienated, like they're sitting outside of the classroom experience because the history being taught doesn't reflect their heritage, their ancestors' contributions. They don't feel ownership.
Because they're simply not told that the foundations of so much of that knowledge are African.
Exactly. They're often unaware that the world's earliest surviving books of mathematics, the Rhind Papyrus, the Moscow Papyrus laying out geometry, algebra, are African documents from Kemet.
Older than Pythagoras.
Much older. They don't learn that the first known philosophers to systematically write about ethics and the nature of the universe, figures like Ptahhotep, Khejemni, Imhotep, these were Africans, living millennia before Plato and Aristotle.
So when you rob a people of their classical antiquity,
you rob them of more than just history. You rob them of pride, of intellectual heritage, of a framework for understanding their place in the world and their potential. Reclaiming this suppressed knowledge isn't just about correcting the past. It's an act of liberation for the present and future. It's about restoring a people's rightful intellectual and cultural inheritance. #tag outro.
Wow. Okay, so this deep dive, it's really spanned millennia. We've gone from establishing Nubia's priority geographically and historically.
Right, as the headwaters.
To confirming Kemet's undeniable African identity through their own words, through eyewitness accounts, and then detailing this incredible intellectual and spiritual blueprint of Met.
And the thread connecting it all is this profound, persistent cultural continuity. The philosophy, the languages, the traditions, they didn't just vanish. They endured, they evolved, they persisted today within Africa, despite centuries of deliberate attempts to suppress or erase them.
So learning this history, it's not just, interesting trivia.
Not at all. It's fundamental. It's about reclaiming identity. It's about challenging distortions that were specifically created to justify oppression and marginalization. It's about understanding the true roots of so much of world civilization.
And like Dr. Asante said, that truth itself is powerful. The weapon of truth is always the right weapon.
That's the principle. Knowing this history, understanding it, sharing it, that becomes a form of resistance. Resistance follows oppression, and knowledge fuels that resistance.
So we'll leave you, our listeners, with a final thought to chew on, something that really encapsulates this whole journey of reclaiming identity.
Yes. A core teaching from these scholars, a powerful distillation. Naming oneself is the first act of liberation.
Naming oneself.
Think about it. It applies on so many levels. It's not just about parents choosing African names for their children, like Ermani, connecting them to Meroitic royalty, although that's part of it.
It's broader than that.
Much broader. It's about reclaiming the true original names of places, saying Lake Nyanza or Lake Tana instead of Lake Victoria. It's about using Kemet instead of just Egypt, Paya instead of Pharaoh. It's about restoring the authentic language and labels to concepts, to history, to ourselves. That act of correct naming, of reclaiming the original truth, is the foundational step toward intellectual, cultural, and ultimately spiritual freedom. It's where liberation begins.
Yeah.